My sister texted, attaching a photo of her brand new restaurant sign, paid for with the lake house my grandmother left to me. I was thousands of miles from home, sitting on a narrow cot in a dim barracks room I shared with 3 other officers when the message came through. My grandmother, Margaret, Maggie May to everyone who loved her, had passed away months earlier. In her will, she left me her house on Lake Meredith, the place where I learned to swim and where she hugged me the night before I deployed. While I was overseas, my parents forged my signature, sold the property for $450,000, and used every dollar to fund my sister's restaurant. The photo showed her smiling proudly beneath a wooden sign that read, Maggie May's Table. She named it after our grandmother, using the inheritance meant for me, and added a cheerful emoji at the end of her message. I didn't reply, not that night, not that month. My silence made them comfortable. They assumed distance and duty would keep me quiet. They believed I would return home, sit at the family table and accept it. They misjudged me. When I finally came back, I didn't go to my parents' house. I didn't argue. I walked straight into a courtroom carrying documented proof they never expected me to have. What happened there shifted everything. My name is Helena Wolfe. I'm 28 years old and a captain in the United States Army. This is the story of how my own family took what was left to me, and what I did next. 18 months earlier, when I received the call that my grandmother had passed, I already understood how my family operated. My father, Richard Wolfe, ran our household the way he had managed his bank branch for decades. Strict rules, tight control, no debate. My mother supported his decisions without question. My older sister, Vivian, was always protected and praised, even when her choices lacked direction. I was different. I joined ROTC in college and later accepted a commission in the Army. When I told my father during Thanksgiving dinner, he set down his fork and warned me I would regret it. He believed the military would use me up and forget me. My mother stayed quiet. But I knew my path and I followed it anyway. Vivian just stared at her plate that night and said nothing. When I left for officer basic training, only one person drove me to the airport. My grandmother, Margaret Wolfe. She was 74, barely 5'2", steady behind the wheel of her old Buick. At the curb she hugged me tight and said, "This house will always be here for you, Helena. And so will I." I carried those words through every deployment. I didn't know that would be the last summer I'd see the lake house with my name still tied to it. 14 weeks into a logistics deployment in the Middle East, I learned she had passed, not through a call but through a short email from my mother. "Your grandmother passed Tuesday. Funeral is Saturday. We understand you can't make it." 4 sentences. That was all. I requested emergency leave immediately and it was approved, but when I called home to say I was flying out, my mother told me everything was already arranged and that Dad thought it was better if I stayed focused on duty. I listened to my grandmother's funeral on a shaky live stream at 3 in the morning, watching Vivian speak about unity and family while I sat alone in the dark. Not one of the 200 people there reached out to me. At the time I thought it was carelessness. I didn't yet understand they needed me far away. 2 weeks later, I received an email from the estate attorney with my grandmother's will attached. I opened it in the mess hall. Her savings and personal items were split between my father and me. But the lake house on Lake Meredith, the one she'd owned for 31 years, valued around $450,000, was left solely to me. I read it 3 times to be sure. I stepped outside into the heat and called my father. When I told him about the house, there was a long pause before he said we needed to talk. He claimed she hadn't been thinking clearly near the end. I disagreed. He cut the call short, saying we'd discuss it when I got home. I stood there in the sun, phone still in my hand, feeling that something wasn't right. Mr. Darnell told me probate was moving forward as expected and that everything was under control. I wanted to believe him. I was exhausted, managing logistics on a forward base, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night. I made the mistake people make when they still trust their families. I assumed they wouldn't cross that line. Months passed. The deployment intensified with non-stop 14-hour shifts, supply delays, and convoy plans that changed every couple of days. I emailed my father twice about the estate. No reply. I called my mother. She rushed through the conversation and said Dad was handling it. He never returned my calls. Vivian sent me straight to voicemail. Late at night, lying on my cot, I felt a quiet sense that something wasn't right. One evening I called Mrs. Calloway, my grandmother's longtime neighbor near Lake Meredith. She mentioned seeing a for sale sign near the lake weeks earlier. My chest tightened. I told myself it had to be another property. After we hung up, I searched the county records online. Sitting alone in the communications tent just after midnight, I typed in the address. The page loaded. It showed the property sold on March 14th for $450,000. Seller, Helena Wolf, represented by power of attorney, Richard H. Wolf. My name was listed as if I had approved it. On that date I had been deployed overseas. I stared at the screen, rereading it until the words stopped making sense. Then I called my father. He answered calmly. When I asked if he sold the house, he paused briefly and said it was the right decision, that my sister needed the investment capital and it would benefit the family. I told him he had signed my name. He said he made a decision for the family. I ended the call without raising my voice. I sat there in the dim light, steady and silent. Something inside me shifted, not broken but resolved. It didn't shatter me. It solidified me. In that moment, something firm settled inside my chest. I stopped reacting like a daughter and started thinking like someone who had been wronged. The version of me who would have pleaded or cried no longer existed. 2 days later, during a briefing, my phone buzzed. Under the table, I glanced at a photo Vivian had sent. A storefront with a freshly painted wooden sign in gold script. Maggie May's table. She stood outside smiling in an apron, arms open wide. Inside I could see neatly set tables and warm lighting. Her message read, "Thanks for your service. Grandma would have loved this." I stared at it for a long time. She had named the restaurant after our grandmother. The same grandmother whose lake house funded it. The same grandmother who had legally left that property to me. I didn't respond. Instead, I returned to my quarters and opened my laptop. I emailed Major Daniel Crow, a judge advocate general officer on base. Months earlier, he had briefed us on legal protections for service members. I never imagined I would need that information. My subject line was simple. I need legal advice. It's personal. I attached the county sale record, a screenshot of Vivian's message and a copy of the will. Then I waited. My silence over the next few months wasn't surrender. It was preparation. When I met with Major Crow, he asked clear, direct questions. Was I present during the sale? No. Did I sign a power of attorney? No. Did I authorize anyone to act for me? No. He nodded and explained that what happened appeared to be forgery, possibly additional financial violations depending on how the funds moved. Then he reminded me of something important. I had been on active duty. The law provides protections when service members' rights are violated during deployment. Courts pay attention to that. I asked if this could be resolved quietly within the family. He looked at me steadily and said, "They forged your signature and sold your property while you were serving. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a legal offense." The room felt calm, but the meaning was clear. This wasn't about family tension anymore. It was about accountability. Major Crow didn't soften it. "This isn't a family disagreement. It's a crime." He explained the process clearly. First, I would file a police report once I was back stateside to create an official record. After that, I'd need a civilian attorney to handle the civil case, while the district attorney could decide whether to pursue criminal charges. 2 separate tracks moving at the same time. He told me to document everything, every text, email, voicemail, and to stop communicating with my family entirely. Anything I said could complicate the case. That night, I created a folder on my laptop and named it Meredith. Over the next 3 months, it filled with screenshots, saved voicemails, call logs, and emails. My silence unsettled them. My mother's messages shifted from concern to blame within weeks. She said they were hurt, that I was being selfish, that they did what was best for the family. Vivian sent photos of the restaurant, decorated and busy, saying she wished I could see it. My father sent one message: "When you're ready to act like an adult, call me." I saved it all. Every word became part of a timeline I built carefully. My grandmother's passing, the funeral, the notarized power of attorney, the sale date, the transfer of funds. I matched each event to my deployment orders, which proved I was overseas when my name was signed. They were unknowingly strengthening my case with every attempt to pressure me. Major Crow connected me with a civilian attorney, Rebecca Hall in Raleigh, who specialized in real estate fraud. On our first late-night video call, she had already pulled the property records. She showed me the power of attorney document filed with the county. It granted my father authority to sell the lake house on my behalf. She zoomed in on the signature line. The handwriting resembled mine, but the details were wrong. The angle, the curve of certain letters. "That's not my signature," I said. She nodded and scrolled further. The document had been notarized by a local notary named Greg Parson. Rebecca's tone remained calm and precise. "If this signature wasn't executed by you in front of that notary, then we're looking at serious legal violations. The next steps," she explained, "would be handled methodically and by the book. This wasn't some simple family argument. It was a serious legal issue and I had to treat it that way." Major Crow made it clear that the first thing I needed to do was file a police report once I returned to the United States so there would be an official record. He explained that after that I should hire a civilian attorney to handle the civil case, while the district attorney would decide whether to move forward with criminal charges. Both processes would move forward at the same time. He told me to save everything, every text, email, and call log, and to stop communicating with my family completely because anything I said could make things more complicated. That night, I created a folder on my laptop with my grandmother's name on it, and over the next 3 months it filled up quickly. As I stayed silent, my family grew more anxious. My mother began calling repeatedly, leaving messages that shifted from concern to guilt and then to blame. She texted constantly, sometimes saying she was worried about me and later accusing me of being cold and ungrateful. My sister sent photos of the newly decorated restaurant, adding comments about how upset our mother was because of me. My father sent only one short message telling me to act like an adult. I saved every voicemail and screenshot, organized them by date and time, and sent copies to a secure email account set up with Major Crow's help. Late at night, I created a detailed timeline that showed when my grandmother passed away, when the power of attorney was notarized, when the house was sold, and when the money changed hands, all lined up with my deployment records proving I was overseas. The more they tried to pressure me, the more evidence they created. Soon after, I had a video call with a real estate fraud attorney in Raleigh named Rebecca Hull, who had already reviewed the public records. She showed me the power of attorney with what was supposed to be my signature, but even at a glance I knew it wasn't mine. She pointed out that the notary who approved it had worked with my father years ago at the same bank, which raised serious concerns. She explained that proper procedure requires the signer to appear in person or verify their identity remotely, and neither had happened. In North Carolina, she said, falsifying a document like that is a felony that can carry prison time and a permanent record, and the notary could also face consequences and lose his license. It was painful to hear, but she reminded me that my father chose to sign my name. She also warned that if my sister's restaurant had been funded with money from an illegal sale, those funds could be traced. Rebecca sent the document to a certified handwriting expert, and I provided official samples of my real signature from military and tax records. I also spoke with Maggie Calloway, who confirmed that my grandmother was mentally sharp when she signed her will and clearly stated that the house was meant only for me. Maggie even offered to testify if needed. Learning that my grandmother had anticipated this possibility and tried to protect me strengthened my resolve. Meanwhile, my sister continued promoting the restaurant online, posting photos and writing about family unity, claiming the business was our grandmother's shared legacy. Reading those posts while sitting alone overseas made it clear that I had never been included in their decisions, and yet they were presenting the story as if we had all agreed that I was never consulted. No one called to ask my opinion. Instead, my signature was copied onto a legal document so my sister could renovate a space, install trendy lighting, and buy restaurant equipment. In her mind, this was a heartwarming tribute, a granddaughter honoring her grandmother through cooking. Looked inspiring online, easy to like and share. The comments flooded in, praising her and saying grandma would be proud. Even my mother posted a loving message under the photo. Not one person questioned where the startup money had come from. I captured everything. The photos, the captions, the supportive comments, the dates, even the number of likes, and forwarded it all to Rebecca. She responded quickly, pointing out that these public posts showed my sister using funds tied to a fraudulent sale while presenting it as a united family effort. The repeated use of the word family, Rebecca noted, suggested shared approval that never existed. She told me to keep records of every post, so I did. Each upload, each cheerful caption, each comment went straight into my evidence folder. My sister believed she was sharing a beautiful legacy story, but she didn't realize she was also creating a record that couldn't be erased. The money hurt, but what I learned next hurt more. During one of my regular email exchanges with Maggie Calloway, who had been kindly sending me memories, old recipes, and photos of my grandmother, she mentioned something that stopped me cold. She wrote that my grandmother had tried calling me repeatedly during the last 2 years of her life, always reaching my parents' house and asking them to pass along the message because she didn't have my direct number. Maggie said my grandmother once told her with sadness that I never called back and she worried I had forgotten her. I read that line again and again. My grandmother had always reached me through my parents' landline. That's how it had worked my entire life. But I hadn't received a single message from her in 2 years. Not one. I can't say with absolute proof what happened, but the pattern is hard to ignore. She called. He answered. I was told she was declining and confused. I searched for another explanation and couldn't find one that made sense. The thought that she may have spent her final years believing I didn't care was overwhelming. That night, I didn't cry over the house or the money. I cried for the lost conversations, for the missed chances to hear her voice, for the time we never got back. No legal decision can return that. When my deployment ended in August, I began the long trip home, flying from Kuwait to Ramstein and then on to Fort Liberty. After nearly a full day of travel and multiple connections, exhausted and tense, I switched my personal phone back on somewhere over the Atlantic, not knowing what would be waiting for me. When I turned my phone back on, I saw 11 missed calls, 6 voicemails, and 23 text messages, all from my mother. The most recent text had come in 4 hours earlier. They were all coming to pick me up. Vivian had closed the restaurant for the day, Dad was making my favorite pot roast and potatoes, and it was time to move past everything because they loved me. I could picture the scene perfectly. My mother holding a handmade welcome sign, Vivian carrying dessert, my father standing a few steps back, serious but ready to act like everything was fine. They were planning to surround me with warmth before I had a chance to think clearly, to turn it into a celebration and avoid the hard conversation. I had seen this pattern my entire life. Sit down at the table, share a meal, repeat we're family, until the problem faded without ever being addressed. I wasn't going to let that happen again. I called my mother and calmly told her not to come to the airport, that I needed a few days. She pleaded and said my father was trying, but I ended the call and phoned Rebecca instead. I told her when I was landing and asked when we could officially file the complaint. She said the paperwork was ready but added that the notary, Greg Parson, had agreed to cooperate. That meant he was nervous, and nervous people tend to tell the truth. Later that night in an airport hotel, I almost called my mother again. Part of me still wanted to believe this could be fixed with an apology, that I could walk back into the past and everything would feel safe again. But I knew that version of the past wasn't real. When I arrived at my apartment near Fort Liberty the next afternoon, exhausted from travel, I unlocked the door, stepped inside and froze when I heard voices. My father was sitting comfortably on my couch, my mother was unpacking groceries in the kitchen, and Vivian was leaning against the counter with her phone. They greeted me like it was a surprise party. My mother rushed toward me in tears, my sister offered a dessert box, and my father smiled in a way that felt forced. I noticed my spare key on the counter and asked how they got in. My mother reminded me I had given her the emergency key before deployment. I had, only for true emergencies. I told them I had asked them not to come. The mood shifted instantly. My father stood up and said they didn't need an invitation because I was their daughter. I kept my tone steady and reminded them that using that key without permission was not what I had intended. This isn't an emergency, I said calmly. This is a boundary. Please leave. No one moved. The refrigerator hummed in the background. Vivian gave a small, awkward laugh and said it was just dinner, but I repeated myself and held the door open. My father looked at the doorway, then at me, and sat back down. He asked if I was really going to throw away my family over a house. I told him this was never just about property. He said my grandmother would be disappointed in me. I told him not to speak for her. He insisted he was her son and believed he knew what she wanted. My mother stepped in, trying to calm things down, saying I didn't understand the pressure they had been under and how much Vivian had invested. She warned that if I continued, I would ruin my sister's business and damage our family's name. I answered that my trust had already been broken the moment my name was signed without my permission. The word forged seemed to freeze the room. My sister's tone changed, sharper now, saying I was never around and hadn't even attended the funeral. I told her I stayed away because Dad told me not to come. She looked surprised. My mother stared at the floor. My father finally stood and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he leaned close and warned that if I went forward with this, I would lose my family. I looked him in the eye and said,